Episode 29, The Gift of Forgiveness. Welcome to Reviving Your Soul, where Christians are finding the courage to embrace their faith in all aspects of their lives so they can stop being bored or overwhelmed and begin to live the life in fulfillment and in peace that God created them for. I'm your host, Vonna Johnson. Let's get started. Before I get started, I just want to make note that I recorded this episode in December, early December of 2018. It's in preparation for Christmas. But I just want you to know that if you're listening to this after the holidays, it still applies. This is a message that we all need to be reminded of time and time again. So with that in mind, let's get started. By now, you're probably well into the Christmas shopping if you haven't finished it already, like some people want to do. I personally enjoy doing my shopping between Thanksgiving and Christmas, as it really adds to the spirit of the holiday for me. If you're like me, you've started your list, and even if it isn't written down, you have a pretty good idea of what you're giving all those special people in your life. But what about those people who aren't really on your special people list? You know, the ones who said something hurtful to you or slighted you at that meeting. Or maybe it's someone in your life who's really important, but you just haven't spoken together for a really long time for whatever reason. You're at that point where whatever the reason or however long it's been, you just can't let the anger and the resentment go. Or could it even be you, yourself, that you haven't been able to forgive? What if you changed things up this year, and whether you're buying them a present or not, you gave everyone in your life the gift of forgiveness? The kind where you fully let go of whatever bad blood is running between you and finally just said, enough. I'm tired of carrying this weight around and I'm ready to move on. I get it. It's hard. We don't want to let it go. We want to feel vindicated, justified, or even a little self-righteous, don't we? What we forget about is that forgiving someone doesn't mean that we agree with what they did or that we think that what they did is okay. All we're doing when we forgive is giving up our right to condemn someone for their actions and turning the power to judge and administer justice over to God. Although it can be a very powerful thing to do, we don't even have to tell the other person that we forgive them. It's an act of release that we actually do for ourselves. So if that is true, why is forgiveness so hard for us? Why do we insist on carrying hard feelings and hurt around with us until it festers like a thorn in our side? It can literally feel like you are carrying a bag of bricks around with you. In fact, if you're like a lot of people, you do. You see, instead of dealing with our feelings, turning them over to God and working through them, so many of us eat them or hold them in our bodies until they become pain. Real, live, physical pain. These are feelings that are literally walking around with us every step we take, whether we are aware of it or not. Even when we say we forgive the other person for their transgression, no matter how big or small, we almost always never forget, do we? It's like we carry the resentment and the betrayal around like some sort of trophy. But if we truly forgive, if we let go of the bitterness and allow ourselves to let go of all the pain, only then will we really experience the healing and the freedom that comes with letting go. Of course, some people are easier to forgive than others, aren't they? There are those that learn from their mistakes, and as a result, we find it easy to let them off the hook. They can be trusted with our love. But what about those people who just never really figure it out? They keep screwing up and coming back for more. It seems that they literally can suck us dry with their constant need for forgiveness, doesn't it? After a few times, we want to write them off and move on to those who don't challenge us quite so much. But that isn't how it's meant to be. In Matthew 18, verses 21 and 22, Jesus says that we are to forgive 70 times 70 times. Really, as many times as it takes. We aren't even supposed to keep track. If you think about it, the Lord's Prayer was given to us by Jesus as a way that we are to pray. And if you look at that, there are really only 6 lines in the Lord's Prayer, in the total prayer. And do you realize that of those 6 lines, 2 of them are devoted to forgiveness? Forgive us our sins, just as we forgive those who have sinned against us. I think he meant that. When we honestly assess the value of the sins we have been forgiven, How could we ever hold someone else's sin over their head? Forgiveness is the cornerstone of our relationship with God, just as it should be the cornerstone of our relationship with those in our lives. The story in Matthew 18 really gives a vivid picture of how ridiculous it is when we hold grudges. It goes like this. There was this king who decided to bring his accounts up to date with his servants who had borrowed money from him. In the process, one of his debtors was brought in who owed him millions of dollars. The servant couldn't pay, so the king ordered that he, his wife, his children, and everything he owned be sold to pay the debt. But the man fell down before the king, and he begged him, "Oh, sir, please be patient with me. I will pay it all." Then the king was filled with pity for him, and he released him and forgave his debt. But when the man left the king, he went to a fellow servant who owed him a few $1,000s. He grabbed him by the throat and demanded instant payment. His fellow servant fell down before him and begged for a little more time. "Please be patient. I will pay it," he pleaded, but his creditor wouldn't wait. He had the man arrested and jailed until the debt could be paid in full. When the other servants saw this, they were very upset. They went to the king and they told him what happened. Then the king called in the man he had forgiven and said, "You evil servant, I forgave you that tremendous amount of debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant just as I had mercy on you?" Then the angry king sent the man to prison until he had paid every penny. That's what our Heavenly Father will do for us if we refuse to forgive our brothers and sisters in our hearts. Unfortunately, when we've been wronged, or we think we've been wronged, we always want to insist that the wrongdoer seek us out and apologize. We imagine conversations in our head of how the plea for forgiveness will go and what a witty response we will give to them. Our anger gets larger and larger, but it truly only hurts us at this point. The transgressor has moved on and has no idea of the rage that is flowing through us, causing stress, sleepless nights, and even pain. What we forget is that sometimes the transgressor isn't even aware of the wrong that they've committed, so we can be waiting for an apology that will never come. In fact, whatever action they took may actually been meant to be a positive thing, and we just simply misinterpreted the action and incorrectly and took it to be a negative against us. We've all done it. In fact, marriages and families have been torn apart by this miscommunication where neither party actually said or meant what the other party thought they heard. When we get hurt, some of us want people to get what they deserve. What we forget is that no one deserves forgiveness. We are all sinners, and we all fall short of the glory of God. The person who sinned against us may be wrong, abusive, cruel, manipulative, controlling, a liar, or even a bully. But the missing piece is that the question of what led them to be that way. What pain and abuses have been perpetuated against them to cause them to behave that way? Although there is no excuse for their behavior, it does help to look at the situation to see what pain they have been dealing with. Forgiveness also challenges us to think about the pain we have inflicted on others and our need to receive forgiveness. It reminds me of the story of the adulterous woman that John tells about. She had been caught in the act of adultery, and the religious leaders were trying to trap Jesus into saying something that they could use against him. You can read this story at the beginning of John chapter 8, but the part that applies here is where Jesus says, "Let those who have never sinned throw the first stones." I think we are often quick to forget the forgiveness that we've been granted. We pass judgment on ourselves and others and forget that God's role is to judge, not ours. We are to show forgiveness and compassion to ourselves and to others. We often cling to the wrong and continue to punish the other person, and sometimes ourselves, over and over again. But maybe it's time to let go of the wrong, get past the pain, and begin anew. I, for one, am grateful that Jesus forgives me every single time I screw up, every time I forget his promises, and every time I ignore his command to love God and others above all else. How about you? Are you ready to give the gift that benefits both the receiver and you? When you think about it, Give is right in the word itself. Forgive. This Christmas, let's try it on and see how it feels. Let's forgive every hurt, past and present. Let's all hit reset and start with a year free of the sins of the past. Start a new page without all the old baggage. You can be sure that the person you forgive will mess up again, but then so will you. None of us deserve it, but that is why it's called unconditional love. If this struck a chord for you today, don't waste another minute holding the anger or grudge you have against that person you've been holding resentment for. Let it go. And if you can, let them know about it. If you aren't able to do that today for one reason or another, pray about it. Our God is an amazing God. Who knows what miracle he may be holding for you if you finally let it go. If the person you are judging is yourself, it's time to let that go too. If you haven't already, pray about it and ask for forgiveness. Then give yourself permission to let it go, move on, and start a new chapter in your book. If you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share it with them. If you are ready to let it go but need some help doing it, let's talk. I would love to help you create a path to the forgiveness that you need in your life. Thanks for stopping by. I pray you have a Christmas season full of love and forgiveness.